I feel like Nice and the French Riviera are one of those places in the world where expectations are kind of sky high. And that's probably because on social media, people always glamorize the beauty, the scenery, because it is spectacular. But we don't get a lot of what's it actually like living there? What's the culture like? What should I expect? So that's what this video is about. And for context, my name is Camden. I stayed there for a full month based in Nice, and I explored the French Riviera. And if you're new here, the 10-second overview of me is I move to a new country every single month. I'm typically making travel videos with like implementable like travel tips, but this is not one of those. This is a series where I talk more about the cultural differences, just the realities, the observations that I made while staying in a place. So that's what you can expect over the next 15, 20 minutes, however long I ramble. Before I jump into all of this, we're going to cover a lot, some of the misconceptions, things that I wish I had known, cultural things that I really enjoyed, and a lot of things that I didn't enjoy as well. So if you're a local, please chime in if you feel like I'm off base on something. Don't be afraid to let me know. I recognize that I only spent a month there, right? So longer than your average tourist is going to have the opportunity to spend, but definitely not representative of what it would really be like living year after year in a place. And if you're a tourist, same thing. Feel free to let me know if like any of these observations rang true for you and your short-lived experience as well, because I recognize everybody's got a different perspective, and I really do welcome the feedback, even if it's negative. Feel free to let me know. I feel like that's how we can all learn from one another. So let's talk about a couple different things. Let's start with some of the misconceptions. One of my biggest misconceptions was around the affordability. Going into it, I expected that it was going to be a really expensive place to be. Part of that is because obviously it's France, and that is one of the more expensive countries to visit. Being in Western Europe, you've got places like Cannes, where you got the big film festival and celebrities. You've got Monaco, which I know isn't a part of France, but I mean like a 20-30 minute train ride away from Nice, and that is like the ultra wealthy. It's definitely like a ritzy area, right? But my reality and experience was Nice was a lot more affordable than I expected. Not saying it's like a budget destination at all, but it is more affordable than I expected. For me, $100 a day was more than enough. I really did find that there were a lot of free things to do. There's so much beauty in nature, and we'll touch on all that in a minute, but that was a misperception on my end of not knowing what to expect money-wise, and I do think that it's a place that is well worth a visit and can be done in an affordable way. I think another thing that was a misperception was when you think of like French culture, a lot of people warn about, oh, French service isn't always the best. Sometimes it's a little bit cold and off-putting. I don't know if it's the regional difference because you're down by the water and there's just like a more laid-back lifestyle, but I did not experience that in Nice. I actually felt like the service was some of the best that I've experienced anywhere in the world. The locals were so kind. The service members were so kind. Tried to teach me French, and I did make a whole like tips video. And you'll notice in that video, if you watch it, I butcher like every French word imaginable. I do not speak French. I had a really hard time picking up the language. And they were all so patient and probably were laughing at me, which is understandable. You should be laughing at me. Like, it was laughably bad. But I really never experienced that cold service that a lot of people talk about. So I thought that was noteworthy as well, because it was a misperception that I had. And it was a nice one to have the opposite of what you expect. Another thing is with the beaches. I think, again, social media really likes to show the glitz, the glam, and a lot of that is through the scenery. I think a lot of people glamorize like, oh, I'm going to go and just sit on the beach and hop around. And that is a wonderful thing to do, but one of the biggest differences that people sometimes aren't prepared for is what do the beaches actually look like? What's the culture there? And the beaches are rock. There is no sand. And these rocks are pretty sizable. They're smooth, but they're not particularly comfortable to lay or walk on. But like everything in life, there's pros and cons. So I'll walk you through a couple of those. Con is it's not comfy to lay. In the summer, I imagine those rocks get really hot. I was there in the winter months. I guess it was all of February that I had spent there. And that is something that a lot of tourists aren't going to necessarily like. But I think the positives definitely outweigh the cons here. And one of the biggest positives is the water is so pristine and like blue, like the color that you get because there's not a bunch of sand and sediment being kicked up. It's just unlike anywhere else that I've really gotten to experience. And the most unique part was the sound. On a regular beach where you have sand, you hear the waves rolling in and out, right? You still have that, but when the waves pull back, because you have the rocks, the waves aren't quite strong enough to fully lift the rocks, but they are strong enough to pull them. So the rocks like topple over one another, but they're heavy enough where basically when the waves are pulling back, it's just this gorgeous sound of rocks rolling over. And it's just, I haven't heard anything like it anywhere else in the world. And it was just incredibly unique and incredibly beautiful atmosphere. Something that I really think you might appreciate. So I did want to talk about that. And yes, there are some sand beaches that you can get to in other surrounding towns. And we'll get to some of those places that you can travel and explore throughout the French Riviera in a little bit. But that's something that is noteworthy in Nice. I've got a couple other outline things. So every now and then I'm going to look down here just to make sure I hit on some of all of this stuff. But let's talk about reality or lack thereof in terms of the perception and the beauty from what we see on social media and what it's actually like. This is one of the places where I think social media actually does a pretty good job showing the reality. It really is that stunning. It felt like everywhere you turned, it was just natural beauty that was just really impressive. A lot of wonderful views. Of course, you have the beaches, but also some of the surrounding towns and areas have just a lot to offer. I think one of the places that is really close to Nice is a place called Ez, and it's this old little like medieval like village that it is at the top of like this little mountain and it overlooks the water, and it was just one of the most stunning places ever. If you have never heard of Ez, Google it real quick while you're listening to this. Just an unbelievable spot, like probably top 5 in the world in terms of just that raw beauty. And you have that all along the French Riviera. And one of the things culturally that is really unique is a couple things. One, you have so many towns and beachside like villages that are so accessible. Public transportation is wonderful. Having a car here probably would be best, but I did not, and I had a really easy time exploring everything because the trains are really well connected. So whether that's Antibes, whether that's Cannes, whether that's Menton, whether that's going into Monaco or going over to Italy, there's so much to explore, and it's also accessible that even though Nice itself isn't a place where I'm like, yeah, there's like so much to do in Nice in terms of like entertainment, that kind of plays into like the lax lifestyle. It's like, yeah, you're going to walk the promenade and just enjoy. You're going to sit on the beach and have a picnic. You're going to take your time drinking, coffee or having your, croissant, bread, whatever you're going to have. There's so much simple stuff to enjoy. And if you do want to go and do something, I often found that I was just like leaving Nice and exploring places. And I could have spent so much more time exploring just because there's so much to see. And I think that's one of the other like really unique pieces is there's not many places in the world where you can experience so many different cultures in a short area and like in a single day. So for example, Ventimiglia is this little Italian town, and it's right across the border. It takes like just under an hour from Nice to get there. So it's like, hey, you could say, I want to wake up and take the train and go to Italy for pizza for lunch. And then on the way back, you could hit a place like Monaco and say, okay, I want to see the real ritzy, fancy, rich people, which typically isn't my vibe, but that very much exists and is an option if that's something that you're looking for there. And then you can be back in Nice all like before the late afternoon, early evening, and we did that. And there's something special about that, just having access to the different cultures, to those different places, the cuisines. Yes, there's a lot of overlap, but they are different places and different cultures and so many just different things to appreciate. So that makes this region, really, really special in my mind. And I think there's a couple things that I really didn't like. So let's address some of those and then we'll jump back into a couple other positive culture things that I picked up on and noticed. And we'll see if you agree with these. But one of the things that drove me crazy was In Europe in general, Sundays are a pretty low key day. A lot of things will be, shut down or shut early. Nice kind of took that to an extreme. Even like grocery stores by like 3, 4 p.m., they were closed. And I love that for the locals. Love people getting to like take that time off and just enjoy and relax, rejuvenate. Love that. But that can be a culture shock if you're not somebody who's used to it. Or if you're somebody who's traveling in on a Sunday like I did. That was probably a mistake that I made. Got into town, it was like, oh my gosh, nothing is open. Like, I'm hungry. I basically have to resort to like convenience store types of places, to grab food, which, again, really nitpicky, small thing, but it is something to be aware of, is that things definitely close early. But one thing that I am going to push on and say, man, this really wasn't a fun experience culturally. The amount of places that I would like look up online and it says it was open, and I'd walk across town to go try something, and then I'd get there and it was closed. And you go online and you say, wait, it says it's open, and online it says it's open, but nope, it wasn't. They were actually closed. That was happening like almost on a daily basis for me. Never anywhere in the world that I have traveled in these like 3 years of living this lifestyle have I experienced such an extreme in that regard. So maybe the workaround there is call ahead of time. I probably should have been doing that, but that was something that did drive me a little bit crazy, because I am somebody who's constantly up and about and just like to pop into places, and that was a little bit harder to do here. Again, maybe it's nitpicky, but it was a very real experience from my perspective. So let me know if you've experienced similar things there. One of the other cultural things that I really did love, just enjoyed so much, was, of course, you hear that, you're going to walk into, a bakery and you're going to get a fresh loaf of bread. You're going to have your pain au chocolat or whatever your pastry, choice is going to be in the morning. And that was so fun to actually take part in and observe how locals interact with it. You just don't realize how often you're going to be in those places and how it really is like a daily ritual. I was buying bread every day and somehow it was gone by the end of the day, but I felt okay. Like, it didn't hurt my stomach. I didn't feel like I was putting on a bunch of weight. Like, it really was a fun experience going and trying different bakeries around town and picking up your bread and seeing how even just across different neighborhoods, that experience is a little bit different. So I'd recommend that if you do go, definitely, yes, of course, you can do the touristy stuff. You can focus on the nature and the beaches and whatnot, but don't miss out on the opportunity to wake up early and watch how the locals interact with those things, how they interact with the fresh markets, that are there in Old Town and in other areas of the town as well. There's just something special about it that expectation wise, you're still surprised, even though you are expecting it. You're surprised at just how big of a role it plays, or at least it played for me. So I thought that was noteworthy there. A couple of other things. Sorry, I'm looking at the phone just to make sure I'm hitting all these. A couple cultural things that I didn't expect. One was, when you think of Nice and you think about, again, like the money, the wealthy population there, you expect there to be people dressing nice, but you don't recognize how much it's just kind of the entire lifestyle revolves around that. In some ways, yes, of course, people dress nice. It didn't mean that they had to be wearing like super expensive things. They're all just kind of put together. But the point I'm trying to make here, and what actually shocked me, was like the amount of hair salons and places that were there to serve your appearance, including gyms. I have never been to a place where you see so many gyms. And typically as an American, it's a pretty American thing to notice gyms all over the place. When you get to Europe, you typically don't encounter a lot of gyms. It was just a complete shock to see just like gyms on every street, it felt like, in Nice. And what I found really interesting was, in the US, gyms tend to be like really large places. Like, you drive to them, you're not going to be watching people work out per se. It felt like in Nice, you were almost on display working out. And the people, I mean, hey, credit to you locals, like, these people are in shape. Making me feel bad about myself. I'm not the gym rat, you could probably tell, but there really was an emphasis on just like healthy lifestyle, working out, putting effort into the appearance, which as somebody who is a little bit more of a budget traveler, and this is my uniform, I own like a bunch of these t-shirts. That was a fun thing to try to like fit in with. But it really was something that stood out. I had never seen so many gyms with just kind of like a display window where you can see people working out. It's like you want people to know that you're working out and encourage them to do so as well. So I don't know if that was just some of my own insecurities popping up there, but it was something that I noticed, and it was surprising. Another thing that culturally I recognized was in the children. This seems to be like a very, I don't want to say family oriented in that like it is a perfect place for families to be, but you see families in pretty much every city that you go to. And it's always interesting to see the dynamic, right? How are parents parenting? How are they interacting with their partner? How are they interacting with the children? What are the children doing? What do they look like? Do people seem happy? And this seemed to be one of the places where children had like the biggest smiles. Children seemed really happy in this place. I don't know if that's a reality or just my perception of it, but there seemed to be just a very positive outlook on life and positive experience for the children. A lot of parks, a lot of playgrounds. The schools were beautiful. The ones that we saw, and I know that we probably saw a couple of the really nice fancy ones, so maybe it's not representative of all of them, but the schools that we did see, like, wow, that is not where I went to school in the US. And it's not saying anything bad about my school experience because I had a perfectly fine education. Maybe not, I don't know. I guess other people can be the judge of that, but it really did just feel like they had some beautiful schools and so many things for young people. Just that really high quality of life. And perhaps one of the reasons why I saw it so much was because of being there in February when there were less tourists. I imagine that's maybe a little bit different in some of those summer months when I would assume this place just gets swarmed with tourists. So locals, I'd love to know, like, do you guys leave in the summer? Are these things that are really only seen during those winter months, that off-season time period? But that was something that was just kind of beautiful to see and interesting to observe. One of the other things that, I don't know, it just felt like there was a really high quality of life with like the slow pace. And for locals, it almost feels like in some cities you're walking to places, where Nice is one of those places where you're walking to walk, if that makes sense. Like how the promenade is integrated, how you have like kind of the actual port or harbor. What's the word I am looking for? Marina. I don't know what word. I don't know why it's not coming to my head, but one of those probably fits it. But all of the different areas that you kind of walk, the coastal path. If you haven't seen or aren't familiar with the coastal path, it's just like this beautiful walkway where you are right up against the ocean the whole way. It kind of feels like a hike, but there's just such great access to nature, and being active and taking that slow, really like appreciative way about life in Nice and in the French Riviera. So much so that I'd say I wouldn't necessarily go as a tourist unless I had time to spend more than a couple of days. Because I think there's some cities around the world where, hey, if you're going to pop into a major city for 24 hours, that fits the vibe, right? Because you're going around, you're hustling and bustling, you feed into that energy. But it would almost be difficult visiting Nice or, exploring all those other towns, because I felt like a lot of these other places around felt like that slower pace of life. And it feels like the energy wouldn't match if you were trying to rush through it. You're really going to get a better appreciation for this place if you have the time and ability to sit back, watch, have that slow pace like the locals. So I could be off on that as well, but that really is how I felt. And one of the other things, which, I don't know, this is completely random, but just something I really appreciated, wonderful public transportation, but the airport, just a breeze, just like a true pleasure, which you don't typically say like, hey, an airport was a pleasurable experience. No, this one actually was like small, but it had all the amenities you would want in an airport, really easily accessible, from downtown, like short drive. You can take the tram, like just an easy experience overall. I really appreciated that. So you probably have that to look forward to. But would love to know from you guys in the comment section, again, what were your experiences? And if you've made it to this point in the video and you do want a weekly update from me, I do have a newsletter where I share a helpful travel tip every single week, as well as a personal update of kind of where I am in the world. And I talk about some of these cultural differences that I notice on a weekly basis. So if you want, the link will be in the description for that. And if you do want to know that whole, I think it's like 52 tips, or it's some absurd amount of number of tips that I picked up over the time of being in Nice, and you want to learn about all those things, you can click on this video right here so you can learn all those. But I appreciate you watching. I'm looking forward to reviewing the comments, and we'll catch you guys next time.